Just to show you how much I love using UDFs, I want to pop over to Nordic and just walk through some of the code just to show you how prolific UDFs seem to be inside of actual code that I write. So I already have the Nordic create script here, and without getting into the details, Nordic stands for New Object Relational Database. It's an object relational facade that in essence makes SQL Server appear to run as an object database instead of a relational database. And while going through the entire details of Nordic is way beyond the scope of this series, if you go to my website of SQLServerBible.com, you can download the code, play with it if you want to. You can download a white paper on it, read an article in Microsoft Architecture Journal on it, and there's other information there too on Nordic. But what I want to focus on right now is to show you how often inside of Nordic I use UDFs. In fact, the ability to encapsulate logic within a data source and use it in a query is really the technology that was the breakthrough that allowed me to create Nordic. So to find all the functions in here, I'm just going to cheat for a second and highlight the word function and say find and replace quick find, bookmark all. Close it. And this will create a bookmark for every time function is used, and then Control-K, Control-N sequence will just pop to the next bookmark. Inside of Nordic, there is a class structure that keeps track of classes and inherited classes and subclasses so that there's inheritance. And I use this function subclasses and superclasses throughout all of the code to run up and down that hierarchy of classes. Nordic also generates code all by itself, and that's cool too, using T-SQL to generate T-SQL on the fly. And part of what's happening right here is I'm generating a function for every class to help retrieve objects for those classes. This is the fetchObjectID function, where I pass to it a class name and an object code, and it returns to me the object ID for that class, including the ability to work with inherited classes, sort of a sense of polymorphism. So if there's a horse object, I can pull that object back even if I say find it as a mammal or find it as an animal, which is very cool. And that's all embodied right here within the class structure and within this UDF. Fetch object ID, fetch state, another way of just navigating the classes for superclasses. And this is pretty cool if we didn't see this before. Within this UDF, select and a nested UDF, passing the superclasses. So class name comes in and it returns back a complete list of all classes being used, which finds all the appropriate states. And again, don't really worry about all of the object orientation of this. I'm just trying to show you all the cool things you can do with UDFs. So here's an inline table function, and another one to find objects associated with other objects, and yet another one. Here's one where you can simply say, show me all of the objects of a particular class, and it does that polymorphism trick again. It returns all the objects. Here's another inline table function. Here's one that navigates the class structure and returns all the attributes for a certain class. And so on. But basically, just as I scroll through here, you can see all of the bookmarks. And you can see how frequently I'm using functions inside of Nordic. So, UDFs, they come in 3 different flavors. There's the scalar one, not to be confused with just having scales, because it's actually pretty cool. There's the inline table-valued UDF, which is like a view, but has some features of a stored procedure, specifically the ability to have parameters. Then there's the multi-statement table-valued UDF, where you can take any kind of code you want and populate that table variable so you can embed logic within your query. UDFs, very, very cool.